Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do.
The first thing is you have to bring just a ton of energy. So kids get bored really quickly. So you have to be like the shiny object. So we have birds in Australia called magpies, and they like to collect like shiny things and put them in their nest. Like they get attracted to shiny things. So, you know, I always kind of tell coaches that I work with, you have to be the shiny object. You have to be more interesting than all of these crazy distractions that are in our environment. So there are some things you can do just like on a way to make it the environment less entertaining, just by like how you position the athletes. When you get them to like line up and you're about to explain a circuit, don't have someone behind you on a trampoline doing flips. You know, try to put it so you've got like a blank wall behind you. And it depends on the gym and how you kind of do that. Boys also, they need discipline, but you need to find a way to drip feed discipline in like a fun way. So I try to think of it kind of like training a group of athletes to eventually be very disciplined. I start with just more crazy fun stuff. And it's like a sleight of hand trick where you just slowly take out that little bit of fun and replace it with a little bit of hard work, and then fun, hard work, fun, discipline. And then eventually it's more like hard work, discipline, fun. You know, you slowly swap it out like that.
Yeah.
Other things that I try to do is I come up with lots of like fast-paced fun activities. So if I set up a circuit where the athletes move from one apparatus to another, I don't have them stay at that apparatus or at that bit of the circuit, that station, for more than say 15 to 30 seconds while they're young. So I'll either do it where they'll do a certain number of exercises and they move on straight away, so they're just kind of flowing around the circuit naturally, or I'll call rotations. But I almost always have a stopwatch in my hand or a timer set up that actually reminds me to rotate people, because I find that what I'll start to do is I'll start to help one athlete and it goes for too long and we're like 45 seconds to a minute in. And if you look around, everyone else is like stopped being engaged and they've stopped working and they're starting to like set fire to things and, you know, tearing the gym down. So keeping them occupied is a great way to keep the kind of the discipline there. At the gym, I just don't sit down while I coach. And I kind of a bit of a soapbox moment, but I really don't think any coach should. I think if you're at the gym and you're working with a group of athletes, they need to work really hard. Like if you want to produce some good results and stuff, the kids should be almost constantly working with very little downtime. I know there's also, you know, certain energy systems, like if you're training vault, you're going to need to have a little bit more rest to get enough power. But still, I think kids should be working like very rapidly, especially at a young age. So my rule with the athletes, I think, is pretty fair. I tell them that they're allowed to sit down when I'm sitting down. Think about what do I want to look for with like young guys when you're talent IDing, because I think a lot of the problems that you'll see with an older generation of athletes, you know, if you talent ID well, you end up with, you know, less things that you've got to correct later on. So I'm big into talent ID. So I look for a lot of energy. So I often end up with we're talking about crazy kids. I end up with a lot of the really high energy crazy kids, because if they have a lot of energy, if you can channel it, they'll have more turns and they'll get more work done and they'll get more repetitions in. So I really like high energy kids. They need to have very strong core. So I do like hanging on a bar. I test L hang, V hang, and candle. And I'll maybe spot the athlete at first, but I'll test that. Anytime I'm talent IDing a young kid, it might be that we start with bent legs, and can they put one leg out straight like an L? And then can they do the other leg? Can they do both legs? I might lift their legs up to V and then see if there's any sort of ability to keep their feet there when I start to move my hand away. And then candle often is one that's a bit harder. But if you get a kid who can naturally do a candle, like a 4 or 5 year old kid who can hold a candle naturally, that kid's going to be a bar worker. Like he's going to be really good at bars. So I look for that kind of stuff, that core, general coordination, as well as the ability to like adapt and make a change. So I'll get like a kid to do a forward roll on the floor, and then maybe they put their hands behind them as they stood up out of the forward roll. If I give them that cue, can you reach forward? Like we're not going to touch the floor with our hands, reach forward this time. If they can make that change straight away, that's also another good indicator that they can be a good gymnast. Obviously, you know, you take this with a grain of salt. If they're young kids, they might be a good gymnast anyway, but it's just the things that I look for if I'm trying to build up a competitive program. They should be very fast twitch, which means they can sprint well and they can bounce really well. And they can make like skill adjustments. We talked about skill adjustments. And then probably the last thing is I don't actually care that much about flexibility. because while yes, it is great when you have a kid who comes in naturally is super bendy, also that kid normally lacks a lot of strength, and also has those joints that are a little bit, they scare me a little bit. Like if they start hyperextending their lower back too much, or if the shoulders just roll a little bit too much and there's not much strength there. I think more important than flexibility is if you've got someone who's got a tough mindset and you train them well, and they've been taught how to stretch correctly and how to like push themselves in a healthy way, so they're not going too far, but they are still being quite tough. I think over time, like male gymnasts, you can basically make anyone flexible. Yeah. So there's two main things for handstand balancing that I found like really, really helpful. Well, first before we talk about that is crimping the hands. I talk about. So this is going to be really hard for people that are listening auditorily, but if you put your hands flat on a surface, you should then kind of bend your fingers so that the middle knuckle goes up, but the other two knuckles are down. Right? Can you, yeah, like that. So, but make sure that the palm knuckle is like pushing really hard into the ground. Yeah. So that's actually something I started to look into, like what the best thing to do with your hands are, because like hand balances are often like amazing at balancing on one hand. So there has to be some secrets. So basically you're shortening the fingers, and it gives better leverage for like all your wrist muscles and stuff. So that's one of the first things. My athletes always have pointer fingers parallel with each other, spread the hands out, and they claw the floor. And that's the first thing. If you start doing that and you consistently get that, you'll start to have some good balances quite naturally, I found. The second thing is I do what's called a chest to wall handstand. But when I say that, it's just the chest. So the athlete walks in really close and they get their hands within maybe like an inch of the wall. It's the closer, the better. If you go too close, when they push tall, they'll fall over. But what I want to do is I want to find that sweet spot where they're as close as they can possibly be and still make a straight line, and the body will want to fall away, but their fingers are strong enough to hold it. So what ends up happening is they can work on their really good alignment, straight body, but the body just starts to naturally tap on the wall. It doesn't rest on it. It starts to fall away from it. And the fingers get a lot of strength built up just by holding it. And they actually start to get in their brain, because they'll start to fall off and they stay off for a little bit before they go back on. It's a really good way to just gradually trickle in some balance. So whenever my athletes do handstand holds on the wall, that's actually how they do it. We do chest to wall handstand holds. With younger kids, they won't have the ability to stay straight enough. They'll end up just arching. So I don't do that until they can hold a fairly straight handstand. Then the last one that I really like for handstand balancing is to then do the opposite, move the hands further away from the wall, maybe like a foot and a half away from the wall. Then they put one leg on the wall, the other leg vertical, and they lean their shoulders forward, kind of like a press, and just very, very, and the key here is very slowly, the foot falls off the wall just a little bit. Right. And then if they start to lose their balance, I tell them to put their foot back on the wall. They lean and they slowly come off the wall. I think I call them like wall tappers or something. Yeah. Vision, for instance, is one of those things where I'm not like sold on exactly what I want them to do. I know a couple of things. One, I want their head to be fairly still. And I say fairly still because when they arch, I actually think the chin should lift slightly. And when they dish, I think the head should come in slightly. So basically the head should follow the movement of the spine. I think that's more of a natural looking tap. If the head's too stiff and still, I don't think that works very well. And the other thing that I'll just mention as well is the foam under the chin on like during swings. I hate it with a passion. I think it's the worst thing you can do for an athlete because every time that they do that, we talked about the stretch shortening cycle. The back of the neck is being stretched. And what it wants to do then is it wants to switch on. It wants to kick the head back. So you're storing all this elastic energy and then you change shape and the kid might want to do a flyaway or a flip. So they're already thinking about rotating and throwing their head backwards. You're almost always going to get that to go back. You're not, when you've got something there tactilely, like something under their chin to hold on to, they might not throw their head. But what ends up happening once that goes away is, and the coach stops nagging them or something, or the athlete gets scared again or something, it goes back and the head goes back. Yeah. So one thing that is that I also want them shaping 4 pommel circles in ways that don't load the wrist. I know that's like we're talking about loading the wrist and stuff like that, but I'll do things like rear supports on their elbows or side supports on their elbows. So I can still shape the body and get them strong at retraction and shoulder extension, all that kind of stuff. But it's without loading the wrist. So that's one thing is I try to be smart about still getting shaping work done, but without necessarily like adding extra load. If we're going to do a heavy pommel session, I might want some really good technical work through their body, but I don't want to have their wrist get extra sore. So that's one thing. Load management is obviously the key to this. When I've asked you about wrist, or this was your feedback, and so I've gone with that, is basically just gradually increasing how much you're doing. Don't have any massive spikes. Don't have a couple of weeks where you peter off and do nothing and then go, oh no, we're now bad at pommel. Don't go have big peaks and troughs. Try to very steadily increase your training load over time is one of the main things. And then wrist push-ups is something that I do. So again, there's a video on that. But there's a whole sequence of push-ups for the wrist that I took from Japan. And those I found to be like very useful for the guys. So we often do it as a warm-up when they get to pommel now. And I teach my younger group so they can eventually start doing it independently. A lot of my guys will get to pommel and maybe I haven't told them to do the wrist push-up exercises, but they might be feeling a bit stiff that day. So they go through their sets and stuff. And it's just, if you do it well, it's enough that you really start to feel a burn. And a lot of blood is going to that area and you're getting a lot of movement. And I just think it's a good way to prepare for a nice heavy pommel session. And also I'm getting that, bang for the buck and it's strengthening over time. The other thing that motivates me with alongside that is that I know right now that I'm making a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
Like I'm positive that even though I'm trying to educate as much as I can, I'm always trying to think about better ways to do things, all that kind of stuff. I'm just like positive that there's a whole lot of things right now that I'm still doing very wrong. And that in 5-10 years, I'll be kicking myself that I was doing it wrong. You know what I mean? I'm just sure technology changes, the way people train, it's like sports is this constantly evolving field. And especially gymnastics is insanely quick how much people are progressing and trying new things. So I know that there's going to be things that I'm doing wrong. I can wait until 5-10 years later, it becomes obvious that I did them wrong. And I can start to, because I can see the problem, none of my kids can do this skill because I missed this part of preparation 5 years ago. I didn't address like vision on a trampoline, say, so they got bad aerial awareness. So when they're on the apparatus later on, I can't do anything advanced, It'll be obvious at some point that I got it wrong. I'm hoping that by educating myself, I can see before I get that problem, I can start to see, hey, maybe this was wrong. Another coach can tell me, I did that 5 years ago. Don't do it. That's dumb. Do this instead. I can basically tap into people that are smarter and better at coaching than me. They've been around longer. They've produced some good results. And I can find the mistakes that I might be making right now and I can correct them earlier,
Yeah.